Mm-hmm.
So the fighting back part is that if your son, this is take it here. You have a son, Robert Mayberry, what would he be? The fifth. And he comes home and he's like, man, they picking on me, man. They just use me as a punching bag. What you gonna tell him? You ain't gonna tell him to hit back, fight back?
I'm showing up. I ain't gonna tell him. No, I'm pulling up.
I mean, but for black people during that time, and I get what you're saying. You know, people criticize the nonviolent movement,
right.
But at a certain time, these people are saying, "Hey, we have to fight back because if not, they're gonna roll over us. If they're gonna do it anyway, I want the story to be told that I went out fighting."
And we're back with another episode of Gentleman's History Hour. I'm Rob J. 10X.
I'm Equality.
And we have a special guest here today, Randie, the amazing Randie.
Hi, guys.
And, basically a brilliant media personality with Houston Style magazine, and has some great information in regards to Tulsa and Black Wall Street. And that's one subject that we wanted to just explore on today's episode. Not necessarily a bullet point dot by dot of what happened, but maybe just an overview of some of the things that we found interesting, because it was what I knew about it, and then what came from us researching it really wound up being really two diametrically just different things. So
yeah, it's been a very popular topic. I think Russell Westbrook is doing a documentary.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's out yet, but we're coming up on the 100-year centennial, so it'll probably be even more documentaries or more stories that'll come out about Black Wall Street. And guess this is a free zone to chime in anytime you want to. This is real.
I like for you guys to do your thing.
Yeah, but it's a casual
when I'm watching you
conversation.
guys, okay, great, that's awesome.
Yeah,
so
we just we don't want to be too corporate on here.
That's cool.
It's just
I'm like, I want to educate me too.
Yeah.
Like I want that education.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me start with a question then. Like, what's something that you found interesting just in the research journey about it?
One thing I would say is how I approached it was because as a kid, I first found out about Black Wall Street. I think my mom brought something home, and I ended up writing a paper about it in school, and that was my first introduction to it. So I'd already knew about, okay, there was a lot of black people, and you know how we say black excellence.
Yeah.
We used that. We drove that to the black excellence grave.
Yeah.
But so I was questioning myself, like, what are some things that I didn't know when people normally talk about it? And a few things that stood out to me was I'm big on how do you get to a Greenwood? How does black people get there?
Right.
How does that land come about? So I was approaching it from the standpoint of how did all these black people end up at this space at one time? Like in the previous episode on the Harlem Renaissance,
Mm-hmm.
and we asked the question, so how did all these black people end up in Harlem?
Right.
So I approached this with that same question. How did all these black people end up in Tulsa, Oklahoma? So that was one thing that really stood out to me. What about you? With how you approached
I wanted you to go ahead and tell us how they got out here.
I was waiting on that too. But I was like, okay, maybe you want to segue and then go into it, but I'm waiting on it.
That was the one thing, and then the second thing is approaching the characters.
Okay.
Who were the major people?
Players.
Yeah,
Right.
the major
Right.
players going into it. Who was the cast?
Mm-hmm.
So the one was the how, and then I guess after that was the who, which I never really. I've always heard it from Black Wall Street, I'm saying the romanticized way of there's a bunch of black people,
right.
They were elite and
Right.
they built, it was hospitals, they had, grocery
stores,
stores and all of this stuff. And I'm like, man, that sounds good, but how?
Yeah.
There is one movement though, you think about it, like most movements, you say Harlem Renaissance, there's names that come up, okay, there was, Langston Hughes, there were these people, but not to your point, whenever we bring up Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Black Walls, it's not a movement that comes with some names where you could just
Right.
it was this person,
you gotta research.
You gotta go
so
and
you gotta
find it, yeah.
So to real quick to answer your question, and this is just I guess kind of bullet point. The major date that stood out to me was 1889. Well, we like to throw out dates every now and then.
Which
For the
is
people
good.
that's watching it,
right.
so they can
I'm
go and
horrible
do
with dates, by the way.
Yeah, so
I'm horrible with dates.
from doing this, I've become like a database of a bunch of
That's
dates.
great. Yeah.
But well, 1887 in 1889, and then how all of this stuff, you know, even the what was going on with the Emancipation Proclamation with Abraham Lincoln, and just tying in all those different puzzle pieces, and then understanding how that land was Native American land,
Right.
in a bunch of different acts. So just to look through my notes, one of the first things that stood out was the Dawes Act, the DAWES Act of 1887, and they authorized the government to divide tribal territories into allotments for individual Native Americans, and that also included blacks. And then now we press up to we go to March 1889, the Indian Appropriations Act. They were saying Indian, so no offense to Native Americans. This is just documented. Right. This is the act. President Grover Cleveland, he opened unassigned land to white settlers under the tenets of the Homestead Act. And the Homestead Act came about in 1862, and that was by Abraham Lincoln. That granted Americans 160 acre plots of public land, basically for the price of like a filing fee. And then this is where it got really interesting. They had this Oklahoma land rush of 1889.
That's when that oil came, right?
And yeah, but no, that was the oil boom came a little later.
Oh,
they didn't really know.
They didn't. That booming part came a little later.
That came when we got there, when we settled. But the land rush of 1889, it was how the story is told is kind of weird. It's like everybody lining up at high noon. At high noon, and they hit a pistol, and everybody just runs, and this is where you settle.
Boy, that kind of ties back also to one of MLK's last interviews when he was standing in the church, and he said, talking about lifting by the bootstraps, and when he said, well, meanwhile, America gave out millions of acres of land. I love the way he says millions, but that's one of the acts.
But the tie-in to the Native American part, and then that land and how it was just those different acts. If people go and research like that Dawes Act or that Indian Appropriations Act, and then the Oklahoma land rush is really how it gets into the players.
Right, and I want to ask you if your research led you to, there is a guy, I can't think of his name, I want to say last name was Edmund, but if your research had that guy there, he was the one that before everyone was settled into Greenwood, before Greenwood came about, is somewhere right there in 1889 and like 1905, where he wanted to create a black state.
Yeah, he talked about that. Yeah.
Right, and so, and he called the city was called Langston. I remember that totally in my head, but he wanted to create a black state, and although that never came about, Greenwood would have eventually happened. Yeah.
It wasn't. We say Tulsa, Oklahoma, but it was really Greenwood.
Right.
Now the character that
which is a town in Tulsa. Right?
Now the first character that came about for me was O.W. Gurley.
Okay.
And he's from Arkansas.
Okay.
And he was one of the first guys to get some settlement in that land, that what we call Greenwood. So he got that settlement, and he was a real estate guy. He was an entrepreneur. He was also a teacher.
Right.
So when you start doing the research and looking at what black people were doing, and his father was, I want to say he's the product of a free slave. I want to say his dad may have been enslaved around the time. I don't like to call black people slaves. I just say enslaved. Yeah. His dad may have been enslaved. He's one of the characters that came around that time, and he bought up, I want to say 40 acres. Not bought up, but he settled on 40 acres of land around that time. And the other name was J.B., John the Baptist. Okay. J.B. stood for John the Baptist Stratford. He was a lawyer from Kentucky.
Okay, so maybe I had the name totally wrong. So was Stratford the one that wanted the black state? Who wanted the black state that did Langston?
Maybe.
I want to say it was the lawyer. So maybe Stratford.
He was a lawyer, and he built the biggest black hotel in the United States.
Okay.
I'm
gonna go back and find.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up and add that to the notes. Definitely.
Yeah, we'll add it in. But he teamed up because all of the names I kept seeing was J.B. Stratford and O.W. Gurley.
Okay, yeah.
And being able to have this land, and then that oil boom came a little later.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got these two entrepreneurs that's there, and they formed a tag team, which showed that these two black guys were not thinking from a selfish standpoint.
Right, which not to segue, but like that's one of my biggest questions is, in my personal opinion, I feel like there are different groups who are trying to get to the end goal, right? But here, this one is going different route. This one over here don't have enough people to build the Segway. This one over here they're still talking about it, so no one actually gets to the goal.
So
and what's the?
This is how O.W. Gurley did it. That oil boom, Rob, that you talking about came in 1906. So Gurley bought those 40 acres, and he would only sell to black settlers. Similar to our boy Philip, when he went to Harlem. It was similar. That similar story.
It's a Philip Payton GHH documentary coming this year.
Yeah, he sold to black settlers, and when Stratford came, that's when he started building his rental property.
Okay.
Around that same time, that's when he had the largest hotel. So, you know, the property lines for Gurley was the north side. You know, he had a rooming house, 3 two-story buildings, 5 residences, 80 acres of farmland, and he founded a famous church, the Vernon AME Church. So you know, guys out there cultivating the land,
really. And I want to just stop it right there on that point because that period, the 1910s to the 20s, there's a lot of economic areas thriving with black people,
right?
And even was the Tulsa, Oklahoma race riot. There was in 1919 alone, there was over 25 racial riots, and race riots being characterized as
the
white
Red
people.
Summer, the 1919.
Yeah, white people coming into black. So a race riot is not counting us and just counting them coming in the black community. But what separated, Green and basically Tulsa, Oklahoma, in comparison to the other ones, was the level of home ownership.
Right.
So you had. And that really made me think a lot about the power of ownership, because for that to be the distinguishing feature of, basically what was going on in a lot of other communities, it brought me back to thinking about, okay, I haven't always valued home ownership as a, necessarily the wealth building vehicle, but when someone says that there were several thriving black communities, but what made this one different is home ownership, it made me really look at, okay, maybe I need to value that more in how I evaluate what makes a community, thrive.
Right, and it's crazy that, that's taking place in the 1919, you look 100 years plus later, and you're still having those same issues. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen on the news, but ABC 13 did a story on the deed restrictions and racial verbiage found in that. Also, then there was another, the Harris County Clerk Office came, and there's so much red tape when it comes to black people buying homes in certain areas. So, you think about redlining, you think about things that we're still dealing with 100 years later, and it's asinine. I mean, I can't even.
During this time, they basically gentrified what Gurley named the Greenwood District.
Right.
Black folks bought it, and like I said, Gurley and Stratford got together, and they subdivided and sold the land exclusively to black people. So one of the questions is black people, the attraction. Right. Is that if you can go there and buy some land. So black people coming from Mississippi, coming from some of those southern areas where they were catching hell. Yeah. From Jim Crow and all the other things that were going on.
There was even some who came from the north.
Coming down.
Yeah, coming down.
So here we are. So now we started to get into another question I asked myself that I couldn't find in my research was, I'm big on infrastructure, and I was really trying to figure out, what type of black engineers or architects or contractors or people, like if you had roads, how was that being done? Right. Was that all exclusively black? Were they all just contracting, just black engineers, black builders, black architects to build this? Now I couldn't find that. Everything pointed to these specifically to these two guys, and this another guy I wanna talk about a little later that goes into one of the characters. But just really thinking on that level of, man,
That's
how
a good
much of that
question to
was,
ask,
Yeah.
because now, you know, when we started talking about what can we do
Right.
in this day and age,
Like,
and-
what's the agenda? Like,
Yeah,
what's the
to have-
plan?
and
Like,
to have
it should be
that.
one plan and
Yeah.
then
That's a good
execute
question,
that.
too,
That's
'cause-
really a good question.
Yeah, my assumption would be they were black, but it would just
Yep.
be an assumption, you know, because to
Yeah.
your point, you know, I didn't look at it from like who actually was building it. I would maybe ask you as an architect, had architecture reached the level of advancement at that point in 1910s and 20s to where like we couldn't off of just sheer will
Oh,
build
definitely.
a building? Did that require that level of talent to do?
Definitely, because we had the Tuskegee Institute during the time of Booker
Yeah, I
T.
was gonna
Washington,
say, we were
and he was
building
training
buildings.
architects and engineers.
Yeah.
So they were building Tuskegee,
Yeah.
and a lot of that influence was coming into Tulsa, Oklahoma around this time when they started to flourish. And Booker T was one of the people that was credited with calling it, what did he call it?
Negro Wall Street.
Greenwood Negro Wall Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Prior to the name becoming Black Wall Street, it was Negro,
Negro,
Greenwood.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
So-
like that better. I don't like
Yeah.
black in front of anything.
And I mean, they had a school that they built and called named it after Booker T. Washington.
Yeah,
Right.
actually, what is his last name? Basically the black guy who was on the elevator, which sparked up, you know, the
Dick
whole-
Rowland.
Dick Rowland.
Yes.
He actually was a attendee. Wound up actually dropping out of Booker T. Washington
Oh,
High
wow,
School. So
wow.
that's
But yeah, those are just some of the things that, you know, kind of caught my attention in
And them
looking
working
at it.
like them working
you
in
know.
the South, where the white neighborhood was, the South of
Mm-hmm.
Tulsa. Them working there, they had to come back and build their own. They couldn't
Yeah.
do anything there. When they say they couldn't even use the restroom, I literally almost lost it. Like, imagine having
Mm. Yeah.
to hold. They couldn't even use the restroom.
Yeah, we
there.
take a lot of stuff for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
That
so
was
not only you're thinking like, okay, it was segregated. No, back in 1909, you're talking about they can't even use the restroom. So they had to literally, 1905, like going back 1904, 03, 02, they had to literally build everything themselves. So that is just wild to
Like-
imagine, like, you know, not only it wasn't glamorized like
Yeah.
like a lot of us
It's-
glamorize
it's
it, like,
self-determination.
oh, they were so rich, right?
Yeah.
And out of need.
But
there
I
was
want
a need.
That's what we were talking about offline before the show, though. I'm beginning to wonder and really starting to develop a hypothesis as to like, has there been a greater trigger for black economic empowerment than segregation and Jim Crow? Because it seems like every time the option has been taken away from us to participate, that's when we've built, and that's when we've created, and that's when we've really dug in and really come up with some brilliant foundations. And you know, I'm not saying that Jim Crow, like I'm not thanking it or anything like that, but just if we just look at it, you know, objectively, it starts to paint a picture of, hey, when we're segregated or left alone, as Frederick Douglass put it, we seem to thrive a lot
Yeah.
better than when we attempt to integrate into,
Yeah.
you know, other societies. And
$1 billion question.
Yeah, but history has been proving that.
yeah, you know, and I think, but for some reason, more so than any other race, it seems like we have evolved to almost validate our success. And this maybe goes back to Martin in his own words, self stated as being a naive phase of his, us maybe yearning for full citizenship during a civil rights era, and maybe that full citizenship meaning that we can go anywhere. But when you look at other ethnicities, I don't believe that like Chinatown necessarily aspires to be on somewhere outside of Chinatown. It's enough for Chinatown to be Chinatown, you know. And I think for whatever reason with us, maybe from integration on, it's not enough sometimes for us to be, you know, Black Town or, you know.
Because we built this land.
Yeah. I mean, by all means.
Why have us in this 35 block radius? And that's, I mean, I'm not saying that that's my take on it. I'm saying that's how some people think about it. Why keep me in a state of 50 states?
Well-
We built this land. Our ancestors bled on this soil.
Well, I guess my only, you know, I'm not disputing what you're saying, but I just guess my response to that would be, we've thrived when we've been in those 35-acre portions. So if we were just looking at what has worked, maybe there's something to that, because I guess just asking more philosophically than like a position on it, but what's wrong with a 35-acre area if that area is our utopian existence where we're actually able to thrive? I mean, I would rather have a 35-acre area that was doing that than, have full access to, a metropolitan area where, I'm basically not treated in the same way.
And I totally
I think
understand.
the question that comes up is how do you protect it?
Right.
And that's where it kind of ties into Black Wall Street. What we commonly know as Black Wall Street is that, that's happened, but every time we've had it, it's been terrorized.
Right. And you're like literally 2 years afterwards. I mean, literally 2 years afterwards, you had Rosewood, Florida, which was told to us was, that's a fictional movie. No. And the same common thread, a black guy allegedly assaulted a white woman, and then we're just going to kill hundreds of black people and burn down their city, So,
because even the tie-ins with the Native Americans and how they imposed those appropriation acts to take their land,
right,
from and then start subdividing all of that. So every time it's been this segregated area, it's how do you protect it?
Right. That's a good question.
It's not about disagreeing. It's just about, I would love to, it's us and we got a block radius of all of us together, but how do we protect it once it starts thriving? Because history has shown us, whether it's the MOVE organization in Philadelphia or wherever, whenever we have a concentrated effort, something comes in from the outside to attack it.
And by the way, I don't want you to think that I was disagreeing.
No, I don't want you to think, but likewise.
Because I did come in like boom.
But I brought that up to say this. One thing I did admire that I think gets untold a lot of times when we talk about Greenwood is that those black people was about it.
Yeah.
They didn't just let somebody come in. See, the story is like, it was the race riots and all of that. But they gunned up.
Okay.
They gunned up.
To that point though, because I'm glad you said that.
They gunned up.
Because
they didn't just, I'm gonna move out the way. Boss, you can take my land. No, it didn't go down like that.
They gunned up. And I have, I got some brothers offline. We always have this debate about, King and the nonviolence, and a lot of people feel a growing legion of people feel like that was totally the wrong strategy, and they felt like, man, we should have fought back. Now, Tulsa, Oklahoma, we gunned up, we fought back, and what was the end result, of that? I mean, we went out fighting, but we still went out. Everything was burned down. So
I got it in my notes. Segregation and Jim Crow helped it thrive because of the inability of blacks to participate in a larger white economy. So
there we go. Hey, great minds.
But now, on that question, let me give you a little. So with the history of that, the young guy on the elevator. So the whole thing starting off with him being on the elevator with this white girl that was, I guess, the elevator operator. He was like a shoe shine guy or something, as the story is told. And these are teens.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He gets accused of harassing her or something with no proof. Yeah. They take him down to the courthouse. Black folks march down to their courthouse too to protect their brother. Mm-hmm. Not just, they marching down there with no guns, with mobs. You asking to be, hey, it's like,
they
hey,
let the chopper sing. They did.
Yeah,
they let the chopper sing.
It was there in another character. A guy by the name of A.J. Smitherman. He founded the Tulsa Star, which was a newspaper. The newspaper has always been critical in segments of highly populated black areas. Now that I'm noticing from history, the newspaper has always been critical because it's propaganda. He was able to promote a lot of the stuff that was going on to help people and enforcing self-defense. It was a black newspaper, so he talked about the legal rights and called black men who served in World War I to take up arms. He was using that newspaper as kind of propaganda. Mm-hmm. So the fighting back part is that if your son, this is take it here. You have a son, Robert Mayberry, what would he be?
Fifth.
The fifth. And he comes home and he's like, man, they picking on me, man. They just use me as a punching bag. What you gonna tell him? You ain't gonna tell him to hit back, fight back?
I'm showing up. I ain't gonna tell him. No, I'm pulling up.
I mean, but for black people during that time, and I get what you're saying. You know, people criticize the nonviolent movement,
Right.
but at a certain time, these people are saying, "Hey, we have to fight back because if not, they're gonna roll over us. If they're gonna do it anyway." I want the story to be told that I went out fighting. If you're watching this on YouTube, man, hey, y'all, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. This is Gentleman's History Hour.